The attacks of September 11, 2001 were obviously a pivotal moment in history, immediately changing the way the world operated and continues to operate today. For Americans, that day is seared into our collective memory. We know exactly where we were when we first heard about the attacks, but even though the events of that day are well known, there are still many mysteries surrounding what happened. To this day, the families of the victims still don't have all the answers. And here are 10 of the strangest unsolved mysteries of 9/11. Number 10. Mohamed Atta's trip to Portland. After completing flight school in Venice, Florida, Mohamed Atta, the lead hijacker, boarded a plane and flew to Boston. He picked up his friend and accomplice, Abdul Aziz al-Omari, and they began driving south towards New York. But before they could get to New York, the pair made a strange detour. They stopped in Portland, Maine, on September 10, 2001. In Portland, the men checked into the Bangor House Inn. Using the alias Muhammad Ali, Atta withdrew money from an ATM on Congress Street, and then the two men were spotted shopping at a Walmart store. After staying in Maine overnight, the men continued their journey south to New York. It's not clear why they decided to stop off in Portland. One possible theory is that they were shaken from previous detection by authorities and wanted to see if they had shaken off any tail. Another possibility is that they simply went there because they thought there would be lighter security. Or lastly, they could have been meeting someone else who hasn't been identified. Number 9. Disappearance of Sneha Ann Phillip. Sneha Ann Phillip was a Port Authority police officer stationed at the World Trade Center. On September 10, 2001, she wrote a memo informing her superiors that she planned to take a vacation the following day, but she never showed up for work. She was supposed to be working the day of the attack, but her name is nowhere to be found on any official list of victims. Now, we do know that she perished in the attacks because her remains were found in the rubble, but nobody knows exactly what happened. There are a lot of weird coincidences surrounding her death. For example, just a few years earlier, she had been almost fired after being accused of filing a false police report. And then, more strangely, just months before the attacks, she had been reprimanded for mishandling a gun. Then, on the day of the attacks, she was scheduled to testify in a case involving a corrupt transit police sergeant, a case which involved some very powerful people. Some have alleged that because of her upcoming testimony, she was given the day off specifically, so she would be out of harm's way. But there's absolutely nothing to back up this claim. It's also entirely possible that she simply faked her own death so she could disappear. And although she was later added to the 9/11 memorial thanks to a court ruling, her name should really be accompanied by a giant question mark. Number 8. Evacuation of bin Laden family members. 3 days after the attacks on September 13, 2001, 12 members of Osama bin Laden's immediate family were flown out of the United States to Saudi Arabia. This evacuation took place despite the fact that all air traffic was grounded and civilian flights were not allowed to take off. Somehow, these 12 individuals were able to board a flight and leave the country. What makes this even weirder is that 2 of the individuals who left the country that day weren't even listed as being in the United States in the first place. The State Department said that these people were simply visiting relatives, but that doesn't make much sense since they were Osama bin Laden's family. Everyone was pretty suspicious of the situation and believed that the Bush administration was colluding with Saudi Arabian officials to cover up something. The most logical explanation is that the people were removed from the country as a form of protection from any potential retaliation. Since bin Laden would definitely seek revenge against anyone associated with his name, the Bush administration probably didn't want any of those 12 people to get hurt. Number 7. Omar al-Bayouni. When hijackers Marwan al-Shehi and Salem al-Hamdi moved to San Diego, they needed somewhere to live. They reached out to their friend Mohamed Atta, who put them in touch with a Saudi national named Omar al-Bayouni. Bayoumi is considered a mysterious figure because he is believed to have had ties to Saudi intelligence. He is also suspected of helping the 2 hijackers move to the United States and find housing. He was in the UK on 9/11, but returned to the US and was arrested shortly after the attacks. The FBI didn't have enough evidence to charge him, so he was released. However, phone records show that he had called known terrorists, but there's no evidence that he was involved in planning the attacks. After his release, he went back to Saudi Arabia and has basically disappeared ever since. Number 6. FBI informant in San Diego. In the summer of 2000, two 9/11 hijackers, Khalid al-Mihdar and Nawaf al-Hazmi, arrived in San Diego. The FBI had a confidential informant in San Diego who was tasked with keeping tabs on them, but the informant failed to report the names of the hijackers to his handler, even though the CIA had already flagged them as terror suspects. This was an extremely important piece of intelligence that could have saved countless lives. This failure came down to poor communication between different agencies. Maybe the FBI agent didn't think it was important to share the names, or maybe he didn't even know the men were suspected terrorists. Either way, it's a huge black eye for the FBI, and a prime example of how poorly coordinated the intelligence community was prior to the attacks. Number 5. Henryk Siwiak. On the morning of September, a man was found dead in Brooklyn. He had been stabbed multiple times and left to die in front of his apartment building. The victim was a 75-year-old Polish immigrant named Henryk Siwiak. The police investigated the murder, but it appears that they were more focused on the disaster unfolding in Manhattan. Nobody has ever been charged with his murder, which is extremely unfortunate for his family. It doesn't appear as if anything was stolen, which points away from a robbery gone wrong. So what was the motive? Number 4. The dancing Israelis. On September 16, 2001, 6 Israelis were arrested near Ground Zero, and they were caught in possession of walkie-talkies and video cameras. At the time, the group said they were working for an Israeli TV station, but later admitted to being Mossad agents. They claimed they were gathering intelligence on terrorism, but the Americans never gave them permission to do this. They were immediately deported back to Israel. Naturally, everyone started speculating that the Israelis were actually there to celebrate the attacks. That theory gained steam when one of the men was pictured dancing on the rooftop of a Jersey City building overlooking the smoking wreckage. But there is absolutely no evidence to support the claims. The most likely explanation is that the dancing guy was simply overcome with emotion after hearing about his friends back in Israel losing their lives in the attacks. 3. Students' forewarning of the attack. In the weeks before 9/11, a student at Hofstra University told his classmates that the World Trade Center wouldn't be standing the next week. According to reports, he was talking about how American pride would be crushed, but nobody paid any attention to him. All of his classmates assumed he was just trying to be edgy, but in hindsight it seems awfully strange. Once the attacks actually happened, the classmates reported the comment to the FBI, but they dismissed it as a coincidence. The truth is, there's no way to prove what the guy was thinking. He always maintained that he was just making a joke, but that doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't secretly involved. Number 2. Insider trading. In the months preceding the attacks, some unusual stock trading was reported, especially in the airline and insurance industries. Investigators couldn't find any evidence that people were using foreknowledge of the attacks to make big trades, but the timing certainly seemed suspicious. Was someone cashing in before the disaster? According to the SEC, the answer is no. They investigated dozens of cases of potential insider trading, but couldn't find any evidence of wrongdoing. The same goes for a handful of congressional staffers who allegedly sold their stocks right before the attacks. These individuals were also cleared, although one of them did end up being fined for making false statements. Regardless of what the investigators say, people still seem convinced that somebody knew the attacks were coming and that someone made a lot of money based on that knowledge. Number 1. Who knew? Finally, perhaps the biggest question of all is who knew about the attacks beforehand. We'll never know the full story, but it's safe to say that the people responsible for protecting the American public failed. Did those in power know about the attacks and simply fail to act? Or was it truly a complete surprise? Most likely it was a combination of both. There were plenty of warnings and red flags that could have been addressed, but the ones that were addressed were brushed aside and ignored. So to answer these questions might give us a better idea of how to protect ourselves from future attacks. Do you think any of these conspiracy theories are true? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye.